Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Are negative Google reviews hurting your business? Don't let unfair feedback cost you customers. At Webamax, we specialize in removing false, misleading, and damaging reviews so your online reputation stays strong. Our expert team works quickly and legally to clean up your digital presence, helping you rebuild trust. Visit us on the web at www.gowebamax.com. That's GOWEBIMAX.com, or text us for a free quote at 856-840-8343. Don't let bad reviews define you. Get immediate help from Webamax.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm good. I always forget how short the off season is when you get to a Super Bowl. So I'm trying to cram free agency stuff and draft stuff at the same time, which is all fun and games. So this will be a little bit different today, which is nice because I've been doing a lot of film stuff of late. But I never post any draft film stuff until March. But I've actually got through a few players. So I'm sure our wonderful guest will agree today. But when you get to the Super Bowl, the break feels so short. Which has its positives and negatives. There's always stuff to talk about, always stuff to watch. But yeah, it's full on, Shane. But except for that, everything's good.
Who was the first player you watched for the draft?
So I still sneakily go dynasty way, fantasy wise. So I always go RBs first. It's my favorite position to watch as well. So what's his name? Ashton. Is that Genty? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. I should have guessed that's where you go first.
Yeah, I was going to go.
Answer.
Yeah, I went running back. So I've watched 15. Now I've sort of got my tiers, but I always wait till Combine before I publish anything. Although sometimes Combine can kill you, because last year I loved Bucky Irving and then he completely died at the Combine and I was dropped him so far down and then he was awesome. So sometimes you can't win. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the Combine there.
I did that a couple of years ago with Kyron Williams and I resolved to never do that again. And so I withstood the Bucky Irving Combine last year and kept him pretty high, but yeah, it can be a killer at times. So, all right. Well, we are also joined by Brandon Lee Gowton. Give him a follow on Twitter at Brandon Gowton. Brandon, thanks for coming on the show after Jonny stood you up last time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I was really devastated. I would say the Eagles Super Bowl win kind of lifted my spirits just a little bit after not getting to talk to Jonny last time. It is funny, Jonny, how it's just okay. The Combine is here, free agency. It's just I'm not even ready. In a way, I'm not even ready to look at all that. The 2025 Eagles don't exist to me when the 2024 Eagles couldn't have had probably more of a magical season, pretty much. And I don't want that to be over. I want to keep talking about them. But here we are.
Yeah, here we are. It's always a late start. I remember how like frantic the offseason was 2 years ago, trying to get through draft stuff and free agency all at the same time. But we're going to get a start down that road, at least with free agency today. So if you guys have been longtime listeners of the show, we had BLG come on before the season, and we went through some categories. We made some predictions that surely were all right on the nose. We're going to go back through those and revisit them, and then we're going to play a game with the Eagles pending free agents. We're going to snake draft guys we think will return to the team at the end of the show. And so, guys, let's dive into it and see everything we were wrong about. That's always fun. And so we had categories. We listed an MVP on each side of the ball, a breakout player on each side of the ball, a disappointment on each side of the ball, and then a record prediction and a bold prediction. And so let's start off with offensive MVP. BLG and I both listed Jalen Hurts for our offensive MVP. Jonny mentioned Saquon Barkley as his MVP. And before we get too far down discussing this, let's flash back and listen to what Jonny had to say.
I think if he stays healthy, like I've got the feeling his running game is going to be exceptionally good. When you look at them as run blockers, they are extremely good, like sort of ridiculously good. If Mekhi Becton can be what we hope he can be as a right guard, I think his run blocking is going to be out of this world. I think Cam Jurgens can do stuff in space that Kelsey could. And I think obviously Dickerson, Johnson, and Mailata are unbelievably good run blockers. And I think the Eagles are going to run him a lot. I think the Eagles are going to have a really, really interesting run game this year. I think it's going to be a different run game. I think they might catch teams by surprise a little bit early on, a lot of counter, a lot of power. And I have a feeling that Barkley may just have one of those like ridiculous years that running backs can have. Is he going to be picked as MVP? No. But I'll make a case for Barkley where I think some people are still maybe overhyping the running back by committee. I think that's maybe what the Eagles used to do, but I don't think they're going to pay a running back top dollar money and not use him a lot. So I expect Barkley to do really well this year.
I guess you could probably say that Barkley did a pretty good job this year, wouldn't you say, Jonny?
I think that's my best prediction ever. What is great about it is I wasn't even going to pick Barkley as offensive MVP, but then you two went before me. So then I was like, well, I got to sell it. That's possibly Shane. Give me that clip. I need that on the socials immediately. That's possibly the smartest I've ever sounded. When I heard myself say, I think they're going to run some more counter this year, I was like, oh my god, I've absolutely nailed that. I annoyingly then said at the end, he's not actually going to be MVP. I was like, you could have cut it before then.
Well, you were right though. I mean, he wasn't NFL MVP.
He technically wasn't. Yeah,
he
let's
should
just
have
end up
been,
talking about
perhaps.
that.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm going to put that as my greatest prediction of all time. And I now don't want to see the one I got wrong because I'm pretty sure you're going to try and find the clip. I should just say as well for the listeners, Shane's picked all these clips. So if me and BLG look bad and Shane looks great, then there's only one person to blame. But I will take that as a massive win. Yeah, I think I got that one right. And I thank you two for going first.
Yeah, I'm threading the needle here with inflating Johnny's ego before we knock him down at the end of the show. So
even I'm impressed by how good that one sounded. That one was class. It's never going to go that well ever again for any prediction I make. So there we go.
I guess so. The season's over now. Would we all, if we were naming the offensive MVP now, I'm assuming we would all say Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, just the longevity. It is funny that, Hurts wins the Super Bowl MVP, so it feels like a little bit weird being like, no, the Super Bowl MVP isn't the actual MVP. But yeah, I mean, obviously, just getting them to that point, you have to, I think, weigh if we're talking about overall MVP.
Hurts wins Super Bowl MVP in a game where Saquon Barkley has like a 12% rushing success rate. But that still blows my mind how that played out. But so flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, we all picked Jalen Carter. It's the only time we all picked the same category because all of us were just like, yeah, this is obvious. We're not picking somebody different. I do not have any clips for this one. However, is there an argument, like if you were picking a defensive MVP now at the end of the year, would you stick with Jalen Carter? Do you go to Zach Bond or to Quinyon Mitchell? What do you think, BLG? If you were naming a defensive MVP now, who would you say gets it for this season?
Well, I think Jonny should go before me because he was all over Zach Ballin early. And he even said in the recent film breakdown that he did for Zach Ballin regarding his free agency, like that he's not the Eagles' best defender, but he's the Eagles' most important defender. And I think if you're talking about MVP and just how unique of a player he is, like I think Ballin has a very strong case for that. And he literally got Defensive Player of the Year votes. So like ahead of Jalen Carter. So yeah, I think he's in there.
Yeah, I don't need to add much to that. I agree. I think Carter was probably the Eagles' best player, but I would change my answer to Bourne at that point. If I predicted Bourne at that point, I'd have been very impressed. Although I would like to point out I made sure I put my own tweet in there, as I like to say, shout out me. I did call Zach Bourne after week 1. I was like, this guy is the absolute dream scheme fit for this defense. It was so evident to me after week 1, which is why I find it so frustrating the Eagles didn't extend him early. But that's another topic for another day. But yeah, I would go with Zach Bourne in hindsight, but I don't think Carr was the wrong vote. I do think actually we were quite early, all three of us, on Carter. I'm not sure a lot of people were talking as highly maybe as we did on the show. So yeah, we'll all take that as a win.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back and look it up, but I think it was like week 3 of this season for our On the Shane page. We had like a film point on Zach Bond, and we're like, yeah, the Eagles need to get a deal done over the bye week. And unfortunately, Howie wasn't listening to the show yet at that point. So, we missed out there. But let's go to our offensive breakout player of the year. BLG and I were on the same page again here. We both picked Devontae Smith for our breakout player of the year. I remember that BLG started his off with, I thought about Cam Jurgens, but you can't pick a center. And Cam Jurgens was literally who I had written down. I was like, okay, I'm pivoting now because our guest just said you can't pick a center. But then Jonny gave us another gem here when he picked Micaiah Becton. And this is what Jonny had to say.
And if he can just hold up in pass protection, I think he's going to be one of those guys going to have those weird like highlight reel blocks in the run game where he just pancakes like a lighter defensive tackle and it goes like viral. So I'm going to go with Micaiah Becton.
So there you have it.
You're doing me very well here. This is all going very well for me so far. That's a great clip as well. Yeah, I'm not sure Becton was actually the breakout player, but do you know what? He arguably could be. So who knows?
Yeah, I honestly don't know where I would go for if I was saying it now. I'm not sure where I would go for a breakout player. I mean, I think Devontae Smith had a really good year, and I think in terms of yards per like route run, it was the best of his career. I don't know if you go Saquon Barkley and say he was the breakout too, because he's coming off of the year that he had, but it was hard to pick an offensive breakout player for a team that was coming in with really, 10 established starters. And you have Micaiah Becton, and he was a first round pick. And I don't know that his play warrants breakout, but after watching the season, I'm honestly not sure where I would go for offensive breakout player. What do you think, BLG?
Yeah, so like I do these question and answer exchanges with the other SB Nation team blogs, leading up to games, and like a common question I'll get in those is like, who's an under the radar Eagles offensive player to watch? Like I'm like, no one's flying under the radar on offense. I don't know how to answer this unless like you want me to say like Johnny Wilson or Grant Calcaterra or something. Yeah, I think, and that's why I said the Cam Jurgens thing. But like even with that, I think. We hadn't seen him play at center before, but like he had played last year and he had looked good in the preseason at center before. So there wasn't like true kind of like come out of nowhere guy on offense other than maybe like Jahan Dotson specifically in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I don't think there's a great pick for this one.
Yeah, he broke out with 2 catches for 42 yards or something like that in the Super Bowl. Early prediction for next year. Whoever the Eagles' right guard is going to be my breakout player prediction because everybody else is back. So I don't even know. We might have to make a new category next year. Jonny, did you have any thoughts on that one?
No, it's a fair point, actually. There is no one, is there? I mean, I actually think in hindsight, it might be Becton. I think you could probably say Jurgens as well, in all honesty, which would have been ironic because, as BLG said, you can't pick a centre. But I think there's just nothing else. Like, Devontae Smith's weird because he had his worst season statistically. But he obviously missed some games for injury. But in terms of the numbers, I think his touchdowns were up, but I think the rest of it was down. So it's weird. I do think Devontae played like another level, maybe. I think there was a couple of catches, the one in the back of the end zone, the one in the Super Bowl. I think you could say he went up a gear, but statistically, it's hard to argue he was dramatically better. So yeah, weird one.
Yeah, if you look at, so obviously you mentioned he missed some games with injury, but his yards per route run was a career high this year. It went from 1.91 last year to 2.03 this year.
That's good.
He did have 2.0 in 2022, so it wasn't like dramatically better than 22. His drop rate was down. So I think you could argue for Devontae Smith, although it's not a lot of a breakout. It was just a small improvement.
Do you know what? He could be the breakout next year. I can't imagine the Eagles run the ball as much next year, just the way it works. He could
say that now.
Yeah, he could. He could maybe go next year.
You say that now, but the straight jacket's coming. Which another one of those weird comments we were talking about off air before we hit record. But let's go over to our defensive breakout player. Jonny and BLG both picked Milton Williams as their breakout player.
Okay.
And BLG, this clip is for you. So here's what BLG had to say about Milton Williams.
Milton Williams was the guy I was going to take. He had a really good training camp, I thought. There would just be like plays where you weren't even really focusing in on him at all. And it's like, oh, there's Milton Williams again, making a play in the backfield, whether it's kind of stopping the run again, or like TFL in quotes for practice, or getting to the quarterback sack in quotes for practice. But certainly was disruptive. And yeah, the perception thing is really going in his favor, because even if he has like, 5 sacks, to go from half sack last year to 5 is like, that's going to be considered a breakout for him.
I love that you specifically called out 5 sacks, and that's how many sacks he ended the regular season with. So shout out to BLG for his Milton Williams. We're giving no credit to Jonny for Milton Williams. I'm sure he ripped that off of BLG. And then, unfortunately, my breakout prediction might have been a little bit off. So here was my prediction for defensive breakout player of the year. I really want to pick Keely Ringo. I just don't know that he's going to get on the field enough. If he had won that starting job, and I think he should have, granted, I've only seen preseason, but I'm going to pick him anyways. He's going to get on. Okay. I think he'll get on the field enough. Injuries are bound to happen. He's going to get into that rotation. I was so impressed with what I saw from Keely Ringo in the preseason. It lined up with what I saw from him last year when he finally got into the games near the end of the season. I think he's going to be used a lot as that solo receiver defender against trips, to press and run with a guy to allow the safety to cheat over to the trip side. And if he can master that role, if he's able to take that away, he's going to be super impactful for this defense. So give me Keely Ringo. He's going to be super impactful for this defense in the 129 snaps he ended up playing. So I will continue to be a Keely Ringo truther, but I was just you're never wrong, just early, as we say in the business.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you might just be a year too early.
Yeah. So Milton Williams obviously had a great year, as you guys called out. I think if we were picking it again, though, I'd obviously have to pick Zach Bond. Any disagreements with that if we were assessing this award now? Okay.
No.
Yeah. You could, as I say, you could argue for Milton Williams because he's going to get a bigger contract and things. I think it comes down positionally, but great year all around for the defense. Then we went to our offensive disappointments, and BLG and I were on the same page again. Maybe I was just sucking up to the guest at this point. I don't know, but we both picked Mekhi Becton as our offensive disappointment after Jonny picked him as his offensive breakout player. And I dropped the 18 penalties last year stat on it that actually had Jonny asking me to put a different name in post-production for him that he said. And Jonny picked Jahan Dotson for his disappointing player. So I don't have any clips for these, but I think you could argue definitely based off of what the Eagles paid for Dotson, if you have to pick a disappointing player on the offense, because you're quibbling because the offense was great, but Dotson could fit into that category. I still maintain that Becton was pretty overrated by Eagles fans and didn't perform as well, I think, as a lot of people think he did. But I think either one of those guys are probably acceptable answers for that. But again, there's not really that big of a disappointment in my opinion. What do you think, Jonny?
I think I know what's coming in my defensive predictions that I got wrong next. So I'm just going to get it out there and say I would never do offensive predictions better than that in my entire life. I think Saquon for MVP, Becton for breakout, and Dotson for disappointment is... I think I went 3 for 3. I genuinely don't think I changed my answers, which is pretty mad. I know I'm going to change my next one on the defense, though, because I know you've got a flip lined up for my defensive prediction. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I feel like Becton was disappointing in at times in pass protection. But I think for what you would ask for, I think you'd say he was pretty solid overall. He doesn't kill you. And the plus in the run game he gives you is massive at times. So, yeah, I don't think you could put him as a disappointment, personally.
I think he was too good to be a disappointment. I'm trying to think if there's another disappointment anywhere, like, I don't know, like maybe Goddard because of the injuries, or Jonny Wilson because people seem to like him a bit more. Who knows? Yeah, there wasn't, I mean, did anyone really think anything of Calcaterra before the year? I don't know.
There were people that were saying Jonny Wilson was a bigger and better George Kittle at some point.
Yeah, very good.
I guess it would be disappointing compared to that, but
yeah, no, there's no one else I can really think of massively, to be honest.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, BLG? Is there anybody you would name kind of as a disappointing year?
If you had to like rank the Eagles' most disappointing players on offense, obviously, again, so good that like it's not even that they're actually disappointing. But if you're saying someone was, probably Becton's up there, I'm guessing, right? Like just from relative to like who else would you put up there with him? I think Dotson, obviously, I'd put him number one. Was Dotson even on the team? He wasn't on the team when we recorded that, or no?
No, he was.
Okay, he was. Okay.
I'd be the same prediction, if not.
Okay. Yeah. I do think I think there's hope for Dotson from a standpoint of if we're spinning this forward to next year, that he'll have a full offseason now, obviously, to actually rep with Hurts. And I've said it in the past that like I think Jalen Hurts, like his trust factor with his receivers is like massive relative to other quarterbacks. It's important for everyone, but I think it's especially important for him. And I think it's possible he'll never earn that trust fully. And obviously, he's only going to have so much of a role when AJ and Devontae are here. But I do think that could go up a little bit next year.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's turn over to the defensive side of the ball, where we picked our biggest defensive disappointments. And Jonny said Sidney Brown would be his, which so it's not that Johnny's prediction was bad. Actually, it was his reaction to my prediction.
I was going to say that's good. Actually, that's the best predictions of all time I'll ever do. Now that I don't think we should play a clip if it's not to do with my prediction. I think that's unfair, personally.
Well,
there we go.
I want to play a clip of my prediction because it was pretty good. BLG predicted Nolan Smith, but he didn't say anything outlandish, and so I don't actually have a clip of that.
I probably would have put Nolan Smith as well, but I reckon BLG might have beat me to the punch. Or I was definitely up there. If you read my film previews before the season, I was not Nolan Smith's biggest fan, so take that L.
And when BLG talked about Nolan Smith, he just talked about him. He didn't talk about him necessarily as a bad player, but it's just what you're going to get out of him based off of where he was picked. People are going to be disappointed. So that didn't end up being the case, but outlandish there. And then for my defensive disappointment, this is what I had to say. I'm going to go with Bryce Huff. I think that you bring in a guy who last season played a career high snap total, which was still only 481 snaps. He had career highs in pressures, career highs in sacks, but he's a remarkably light player. There's questions how he's going to hold up against the run because he just wasn't asked to play against the run much last year, only 132 run defense snaps. And so I think Eagles fans connect those dots, and Bryce Huff, it's like he's going to have 15 sacks this year. I just don't know that he's going to be able to do that over that volume. I think Huff is just primed to be like a disappointment candidate for the Eagles. And if that happens, it's going to be very visible.
Yeah, I think you got that wrong, Shane. I have Huff. He was I said I had many breakout. I had him as my third breakout as well.
So it was all good until Jonny chimed in there that he had Bryce Huff as a breakout player. So we'll say I nailed that one, and we get Jonny for his first bad prediction of the show.
The funny thing was I was quite critical of him in my film review, but it's funny how sometimes you just podcasts are weird. Sometimes you're like, I'm not even sure. Like, I don't know. I remember being quite critical of him in my film review, but I don't really get what happened to him as a pass rusher, is my honest answer. Like, I was with you, Shane, in terms of the run defense. Like, I was fully with you the whole offseason. I said the exact same as you. I'm literally bringing up my film review now. And I said, like, it's obvious it's a risk. I said, you can't underestimate the impact that increased snaps will have on defensive players. It's far easier for him to look explosive when he's only rushing the quarterback 15, 20 times. I said Reddick is clearly basically better. But I literally said whatever happens, Huff is undoubtedly going to prove the Eagles' pass rush and provide the Eagles with a pass rush specialist. So I don't know, man. The pass rushing film was good for like 3 straight years, and then he just became absolutely like unusable, which is... It is strange. I'd like to see if there's like an off-season piece written from like someone at the Athletics, like a deep dive in what happens, because I do find the Bryce Huff thing weird. I'm not surprised at all he sucks in early downs. I just can't believe he didn't have value as a third and long pass rusher. And those guys are always active.
if you can rush a quarterback on 3rd and 12 8 times a game, you're going to get a roster spot, even if you can't do anything else. So for him to be fully inactive is mad.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened to him. You see, Jonny, you've stumbled into like the sweet spot of content, and that's that you need to write one thing and then on podcasts say the opposite side. Yep. And no matter which way it turns out, you can pull the relevant receipts. Yep. And you look brilliant. So that's the way to go right there.
I'll remember next time. I'm going to make sure I'm really critical in my film review and then really positive on the podcast.
Yeah. If we were actually awarding this now, I mean, it's got to be Bryce Huff, given the contract that the Eagles paid him and the fact they may be trying to get out of it already. But Sidney Brown's a good shout out too, because I had some hope for Sidney Brown coming in as a third safety, and that did not manifest itself. So much so that last week on a mailbag, Jonny and I both named safety as a sneaky position the Eagles could draft. So your thoughts on defensive disappointments beyond, Huff and Brown, BLG?
Yeah, well, on Sidney real quick, like there was times in the year where even like within what you would reasonably expect at that given point, because he was the fourth safety or whatever, like Avonte Maddox was in over him at one point, like late in the year. Like that's not great. Like even if we're getting to like the depth of it all and like there's injuries and there is opportunity for him to play. I mean, it was just a lost season for him coming off the injury. Obviously, didn't practice at all, and I think Vic Fangio just didn't trust him really, and he'll have to earn that in the offseason next year. So, not out on Sidney Brown entirely, but this is a huge offseason for him. Has to prove himself that Vic Fangio can trust him to play on the field. And speaking of being able to be trusted to play on the field, obviously, that's not the case with Bryce Huff. Like Vic Fangio just does not trust that guy to be out there. And when you think about how bad Eagles defense was specifically in that Falcons game in week 2, but earlier in the season, there was a major correction after that. And it was like Bryce Huff is not playing barely at all. And yeah, really weird season for him for, obviously he had the thumb, the injury in there, the hand injury, but that's not like, oh, he got hurt and his season was bad. Jonny, I remember my first impression from OTAs of seeing Bryce Huff, and I think you had mentioned it at the time too. And I don't think this means everything. Like this was automatically disqualifying. But my first impression of him was like, he's so tiny. Like that was my first thought about him. And I was like, it's just hard to envision sometimes when you're like looking at a guy that like just stands out that much. So yeah, I really don't know what they're going to do with him because they're kind of stuck probably with that contract. But like the coach clearly doesn't want him to be on the field at all.
Yeah, it's funny. I always say this. We had a long chat about this last year, didn't we? About like what you find useful from training camp. Mm-hmm. And I was like, certain things I do and certain things I don't. But what I do appreciate is that people like you who actually get to be there and just to say how people look. Because the exact thing that stood out the second I started watching the film was just the guy's tiny. And it's weird because Nolan Smith I find very small as well. Maybe it's just because I've got used to it. Maybe I'm biased, but I think he's a little bit bigger in the bottom half. Like I don't watch him and think, wow, he's tiny. But Bryce Huff was always small. Like it was really weird watching the film because it was like he's just very, very, very small. And yeah, I remember you saying it as well. So that's one of the things I think you can learn. I think when you're up close, you can see these sort of body types a little bit differently.
Yeah, a couple of comments here before we roll on. We've got Kai Galia we should ask Jonny for this week's lottery numbers, or have you peaked early on the predictions, Jonny?
Peaked. Absolutely peaked. I might never do predictions again. Take it as a win for this year and just never get involved.
Matthew also wants to check in on your hamstrings and see if they're still sore from training. So a little bit of context. Somebody asked us on our mailbag what our 40 time would be. And so we had some discussions about that. And I actually ran one and timed it. And Jonny keeps complaining about sore hamstrings or something. But I went on to the RAS site and I plugged in my numbers and ran them as a wide receiver. And I ran a 4.52 a 5.52 40.
Yeah.
And that gave me a relative athletic score of a 0. So the real issue is that they don't have my natural position on the website. If it would allow me to run my numbers as an accountant, I'm sure I would be like 50th percentile athleticism. But so we're still waiting on Jonny's 40 time. And then Matthew also said, might wait a while. Matthew also said Sidney Brown allowed more Super Bowl touchdowns than Bryce Huff had snaps. Yep. I think, wasn't that like his first play in the game too? Like they put him and Tristan McCollum in. It's like first play of bomb to Xavier Worthy, who, by the way, had like the greatest Super Bowl of any receiver ever, according to Twitter, that one stupid tweet. So, okay. Our next thing was our record predictions, and all three of us picked the Eagles to win the division. Jonny and I both picked the Eagles to be 12-5. BLG picked them to be 13-4. So we were all really high on this team. BLG was only off by 1 win. The Eagles ended up going 14-3. Jonny and I were off by 2, but I would say we did pretty well on that one. And then we get to our bold predictions. And so, part of like the bold prediction is this is the part that you just say something outlandish, and if it hits, you're like, yes, I got it, right? And if not, you just let it fade away into the ether and you never mention it again, except we're mentioning some of them again. So my first prediction, well, let me just play it. So here was my bold prediction. The Eagles will start the year 0-2, back-to-back losses. Everybody's freaking out. And they will not lose a game again until the month of December. They're going to be 9-2 going into Baltimore in week 13. And I think that's the first game that they potentially lose since week 2, when they lose to the Atlanta Falcons on Monday Night Football after losing the opener to the Packers. So 0-2 to everybody freaking out to 9-2, clearly in command of the division with a great game against Baltimore in week 13. So close. If I had just said 2-2 at the bye week and everybody freaking out, and then they would be 9-2 when they played the Ravens, I would have nailed it. So I was off on one of the games that they were going to lose, but I was so close with mine. So that was my prediction. Jonny's prediction was that the Eagles would have the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL, and they ended up tied for 4th. Ironically, they were tied for 4th with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, potent offense that everybody knew coming into the year. But so Jonny was pretty close on his. I was pretty close on mine. And let's jump into BLG's bold prediction that I definitely told him I would never clip up and put on social media, but this isn't social media. So here we go.
The idea of Saquon is better than the reality of Saquon when you like factor in Penn State guy, number 2 overall pick, fantasy football guy, only good player on a bad Giants team. I just think there's like a lot more shine on him than the reality meets. I think he'll be fine. But in that vein, I don't think my bold prediction is that Saquon Barkley will not have more yards from scrimmage than DeAndre Swift had for the Eagles last year. I'm not saying he's cooked, but I don't know that he's going to be this revolutionary player that kind of like the conceptual idea of him is. So I think he's just going to be more fine than a revelation or amazing.
That one
awesome.
That one didn't go so well. So Saquon ended up with 1,020 more yards from scrimmage in the regular season than DeAndre Swift. So
that's great.
That was a great one as well.
It's nice to know Shane treats our guests so well on the show. Hey, BLG.
I deserve that.
Just come on. And yeah, the Barkley discussion was weird because I think people do forget that it was not a unanimously loved signing at the time. I must confess, despite picking him for offensive MVP, even in my film review, I was like, he's not as good as he was the year before. Like he had some reps when you were a bit like, oh, I think he's not there. And then this year, it was just like, no, he was just perfect. Like the second he stepped out in week 1, you were just like, oh my God, he's so obviously healthy. It is so weird how he struggled with health for so long. And then he just basically came in and was like, no, he's fine. And he didn't slow down once all year. It is it's a little bit of hindsight 2020. I did say I love the move. I was very much I'm in favor of it, but I got to be honest. I did point out some of the weaknesses. I think the only thing I definitely got right for the weaknesses was I mentioned how many annoying concentration drops he had as well. And I was nailed that one. But I said he was 90% of where I think he was previously. The main reason why I loved it wasn't actually more to do with him. It was more to do with the fact I just think running backs are dramatically underpaid. And it was such a market inefficiency at the time. That I was all for it. And I also didn't like DeAndre Swift. So that helped as well. But yeah, in hindsight, it sounds like a completely bizarre prediction from BLG. But I think going back, it wasn't that bad.
I think part of the reason why was just like, I put a lot of stock in the training camp because I'm there, and like that I probably put too much stock into it just because like that's what, shapes. That's what I'm seeing. And not that he had like a terrible training camp, but I was really just waiting for him to have like that one kind of just splash, like special moment. I wasn't really seeing it. Not even just training camp, the whole course of the offseason. In hindsight, like there were some nice, like he had a couple wheel route touchdowns that were really nice. And obviously, you can only see so much as a runner when they're not doing live tackling at all. But that's the thing. And the lesson learned here is to go back to the days of like basically it was with like LaShawn McCoy early in his career when I don't think he was like lighting up training camp either at all. Basically being like running back performance in these offseason practices probably just doesn't matter at all. And yeah, Saquon was unreal. And Shio Kapadia recently called it like 100 percentile season. I mean, it was like in basically every way. Could not have been realistically. He broke the NFL record for yards in a season, including the playoffs. Like he was unreal. Should have been the MVP. Yeah, I think I was ready to take the L on that take like, after week 1 when I was seeing how well he looked. I was not like holding on to that take by any means. But yeah, I definitely got that one big time wrong. And as a leader too, I think that's another thing that was hard to kind of, like really see until you actually see it like we did. And even in like the mic'd up clips in the Super Bowl, I think that's huge too. Obviously, the talent on field stuff matters the most, but the leadership should not be discounted either.
Yeah. I unfortunately tweeted hours before the Saquon signing that I do not believe for a second that Howie Roseman is in negotiations to pay a running back $10 million AAV, nor should he be. Running back is a buyer's market this season. So people had some fun with that one on Twitter like 2 hours later when the Saquon signing broke. Maybe I just won't tweet things during legal tampering this year. Who knows? But yeah, that's always fun to look back on. I always enjoy looking back and seeing the things I was just off about, like Keely Ringo breakout player of the year. But so that's our free agent look back. Now it's not free agent look back. That was our season prediction look back. Now we're going to look ahead to free agency. And so the Eagles have currently 17 pending free agents. And we spun for a draft order before. Let me throw it up on the screen here. And so I have the first pick. Jonny has the second pick, and BLG lands with pick number 3. And we're going to snake draft 5 rounds of free agents, guys we think are most likely to bring back. And then we'll just keep a tally off of who they do bring back, and we'll see who gets the most right. So I have the first pick, and I'm going to take Ben Van Sumeren as my guy that I think is most likely to be back with the Eagles. It helps that he's a restricted free agent. They're just very thin at linebacker. I think they want to use him as a fullback some as well, and he's not going to cost much. So I've got Ben Van Sumeren as the most likely free agent to come back. Jonny, who's your pick?
Yeah, I feel like there's 2 layups. Like, am I being an idiot? Because I'll be honest, this was my idea to play this game, and now I'm regretting every minute of it because I'm already stressing about it. Unless I'm mental, like, I'm going to go Rick Lovato. I feel like it's like a cheat code, but you don't get rid of long snappers, do you? So I guess my only worry is, does he like retire? I don't know how old the guy is. I think he's in his 30s. But I think I'm taking a layup, he says. I guess we'll find out in a little bit. So I'm going to go Rick Lovato. And if that sounds mental, then please tell me.
Nobody tells Jonny that Lovato is 39 years old and just had back surgery.
No, he's not. He's not 39, is he? Yeah, I was going to say, I was like early 30s. Yeah, all right. I'm sticking with it. Nice 2 really fun options at the start. But there you go.
The Eagles' priority free agent re-signings. Linebacker / fullback and a long snapper. You heard it here first. BLG, who do you have for your first? You get 2 picks here on the wraparound. So picks 3 and 4.
Yeah. Well, I probably would have taken Lovato there. Although there were some snapping issues in the Super Bowl, and I think even in the championship game or the Rams game, but we'll see. You probably just keep him. I'm going to go with, I think this guy is 100% back. At risk of being old takes exposed and jinxing it, Zach Bond. Let's get Zach Bond up there. I just think any discussion about like, oh, the market might be too much, it's just like, I think that's so like silly. Like he got votes for defensive player of the year. He was all pro. Like you don't let those players walk outside of your building. Like you find a way to make it work. I unless he's asking for like $50 million a year, like something totally like astronomically insane, then you just find a way to keep that player. As Jonny said, most important player on their defense from what he can do. And obviously like just so I'm not talking all about that in terms of what I think about Zach Bond as a player. Let's add the context of like you don't have any linebackers. If you don't bring him back, basically, Nakobe Dean might miss the whole season next year, at least like a good chunk of it. And who else do you have? You have Ben Van Sumeren, okay? You have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., okay? But like you need to have better options than that. And Zach Bond, I think, is obviously the guy here. So the real question is, who do I take with the second pick? Because this is where it gets, I think, a little bit. I think we're out of kind of totally obvious territory at this point. I'm gonna take. I'm gonna say it's not like the most juice of a pick, but I'm gonna say Jack Driscoll because he was a free agent last year and he left and he tried to catch on to the Dolphins and he got cut and it didn't work out. And I feel like he might just realize that, and he's coming off injury too. He might just realize, or he might think that returning to Philly for the offseason could be the best thing for him, and maybe he'll catch on with a new team during cuts or something if he doesn't make this roster.
All right, so Zach Bond and Jack Driscoll. I thought when BLG was going to say, unless he's asking for something outlandish like $15 million, I was like, I would pay that in a heartbeat, bring that guy back. But all right, Jonny, that brings it up to you here for pick 5. Who do you have?
I feel like we should have set some ground rules as well, Shane. What's the criteria? When have they got to be back by? Are we saying like training camp? Are we saying, or if they're just not re-signed, basically, I don't know, by the draft or something? How are we playing it? Should have set a ground rule, shouldn't we? Because I'm looking at Jack Driscoll like, oh my god, he could come back in the summer. Maybe we just say if they sign back at some point before the season, then you get the point.
I would say if they sign a contract with the Eagles at any point before the season starts, like if Jack Driscoll were to come back, or if the next maybe we should say it like if the next contract they sign is with the Eagles. So like if a guy goes and gets signed by somebody in March and then they get cut and they end up on the Eagles practice squad in August, that probably doesn't count. Yeah,
I'll be honest, like the free agency class, there's no layups, is there? I mean, I thought I was taking a layup, and then Matt's chiming in on YouTube saying, didn't he have 2 full starts in the Super Bowl? And now I'm panicking already. So I could do with this one. I think I'm going to go. See, I was going to pick Zach Ball.
Lovato's a safe pick because I would try to replace him, but you're still going to bring him back and bring somebody to compete against him. Fair. So I think you're pretty safe.
I wanted Zach Ball just so I could talk more about Zach Ball, but BLG hit the nail on my head, so I'm not going to bother. But I was going to take him early just to make my mental well-being better. I'm going to go with Britton Covey. Let's do it. Just because I feel like kick returner, punt returner. I've taken 2 special teams guys. But I feel like they might make the most sense. I can't see another team paying him any more than minimum, and I think the Eagles will want him back. So I'll go with Covey.
Johnny's like, our special teams weren't that great last year. We're going to prioritize special teams free agents.
At least Jake Elliott wasn't a free agent, so he'd be my next pick as well.
I think that's a good pick because Britton Covey is also a restricted free agent. So he's the Eagles if they want him. I'm going to go with a guy I think the Eagles really like having around. It's a little scary because he got a run of a few games starting, but I don't think he's going to get a big contract in free agency, and that's Fred Johnson. I think the Eagles like having Fred Johnson as their backup swing tackle, especially in a world where Tyler Steen might not be able to be your backup tackle if he's a starting right guard next year. So give me Fred Johnson, a guy who I have to explain to my kids every time they see him that he is not Lane Johnson's brother. They are of no relation. But Fred Johnson, and then on my wraparound pick, I'm going to go with Oren Burks. I think Burks showed that he can be a competent starter for you, and the aforementioned no linebacker depth issues. And maybe he gets a contract to go somewhere because he did play well in the postseason, but I don't know if that was a long enough time frame to erase how bad he was the year before for the 49ers in the postseason. So I'll take Fred Johnson and Oren Burks. And Johnny, that kicks it back to you.
Yeah, I was going to go Oren Burks. I wouldn't have gone Fred Johnson that high, I must admit. I was deliberating between Burks and Covey. I will go with Mekhi Becton, and I think he's been paid a lot in his career already. Early first-round pick. I think he loves the Eagles. He loves Jeff Stoutland. For his career, if he wants to make a serious run, I think staying with Stoutland and playing guard would be better than taking a tackle, like a money's play tackle elsewhere in the league. And I just don't think he should be playing tackle in the league. So I don't know why an NFL team would sign him. NFL teams do stupid things all the time, though. So maybe he will be a tackle. But I think there's more than 50-50 chance he comes back, if I'm honest. I also might be wrong, but I feel like that was the last one that I would say is in the nice category. And I think BLG might have been stitched up here, but I might be wrong, unless you think you've got one that's coming back, BLG. But I'm not looking too fondly at the list that you're left with.
Yeah, I think the Becton thing is really interesting because people in general talk way too much about like hometown discount or like team friendly deal. Like that doesn't really truly exist. I feel like most of the time, if there could be an exception, I mean, Becton clearly like liked playing for the Eagles like a lot, and I almost have a hard time. Like, he's gonna like chase top dollar to obviously not go back to the Jets, but like a team that could be like totally miserable like the Jets. I don't know. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Imagine the Jets are big spenders in free agency on Mekhi Becton and Sam Darnold.
Right. There you go. But then it's hard though, because like what are the Eagles going to do? Because they're probably going to extend Cam Jurgens. So you're going to pay like all your starters, like top players. Like in theory, if there's a position to do it at, would be offensive line, but like you kind of have to save somewhere. So I'm going to go here with not loving the rest of this list. Honestly, I'll start with Brandon Graham because I think Brandon Graham, I would like him to retire. And that's not because I don't love watching Brandon Graham. We all love watching Brandon Graham, but I just like the story is so good at this point. Like if there's ever a time to go out on top, like do it. He's come off the injury too. But I do think Vic Fangio was saying like, prior to the injury, like he wanted him back. He was like, you're not retiring. I want you back for next year before he got hurt in the Rams game. And he looked like he wasn't like he doesn't need to retire. Like he can still play very much. And I think it was the PHLY Eagles show talking about how like Brandon Graham seems to be kind of be in a spot where he is aware of like the story is so good, but he feels like he can still play. So it's almost like he's like fighting that battle. So we'll see. But I'll just take the chance that he might come back for one more year. And then. Man, we're kind of at a bleak spot in terms of some of these names are just like pretty dreadful. And the other ones I just think are obviously Josh Sweat and Milton Williams they're going to make so much money that I don't know if the Eagles are going to be able to bring them back. I'm going to say, I'll go with Kenny Gainwell. And I don't think Kenny Gainwell should be back because number one, I think he's going to get a bigger opportunity somewhere. I'm not saying that he's going to be the lead back, but like maybe a running back by committee where he actually kind of gets to be part of that and plays like what he was supposed to be in 2023 or a little bit more of that. But Nick Sirianni, like admittedly, like loves this guy so much. And maybe Nick Sirianni already used like all his, juice that he gets from winning the Super Bowl and making Kevin Patullo the offensive coordinator. But maybe if he has any of that left, they just find a way to bring Kenny G back. Again, I don't think they should, or it will happen from a standpoint of I think he will get legit offers on the market. But the fact that Sirianni loves him so much at this point, I'll just take a chance on it.
Yeah, the Brandon Graham thing is like I felt like he would come back until they ended up making it to the Super Bowl. And then he came back and played in that game and they won. Like had that not happened, had the Eagles lost the Super Bowl or even if they had won, but Graham hadn't been able to make it back onto the field, I feel like he would have been back. And now it's just like, man, I don't know. The story is so good. Like he could ride off into the sunset. I wish he would have got that sack on Mahomes instead of getting held because that would have made it even better. But alas, he did not. We'll see what he does. Johnny, you are up for your fourth pick now.
Yeah, I'd have taken BG at some point. I think there's a reasonable chance. I'm not sure about Kenny G, man. I just think someone's going to pay him rotation money. And for his career, does he want to sit behind Barkley? But who knows? It's a really good running back class as well. There's a lot of twos. So maybe
wasn't he behind Barkley in college? Didn't they both go to Penn State?
I have
no, that was Miles Sanders. Never mind.
Yeah,
Carry on.
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
I was going to say, I was like, did he? I feel like I would have heard that before. I don't know, though, because why would you pay running back 2s unless you're going to give him actual money? So he might just not get anything. Like, who knows? Oh, God. I've got 3 that I like left. How many picks are there? So I might get one. I'll get one, maybe 2 of them. I'm going to go with Isaiah Rodgers. I think if Darius Slay goes, as much as Shane obviously loves Keely Ringo, I don't know if he will step up outside. And they might decide that a Rodgers-Ringo battle is a pretty cheap way of having 2 options at outside corner, because I would not be moving Cooper DeJean anywhere anytime soon. So I think there is a reasonably good chance they try to keep Rodgers. And if I'm another NFL team, I'm not paying huge money for Rodgers either. I didn't see enough. I saw good coverage, but the play at the catch point was pretty average at best when he did play. But I think I'll go Isaiah Rodgers.
All right. That would have been my pick. Just like you laid out, I think either Rodgers or Slay is back next year. And so if there's a chance they move on from Slay, I think Rodgers they would try to keep around. I don't love anything left on the list here, but I'll take Josh Sweat.
Wow, you're taking Josh Sweat over Milton Williams.
Yeah,
interesting. I would, you can't change your answer now. It's done. But I think that's crazy. That's a crazy.
Well, I get a second pick, so
fair enough.
Yeah, so Josh Sweat, if the Eagles could find a way to bring him back, they can alleviate a $16.5 million dead cap penalty they have next year if he leaves. And so all along, that was my target. And then he had the really good game in the Super Bowl. And so maybe he's priced himself out of that. But at the end of the day, this is a player that a couple years in a row has just disappeared over the back half of a season. And I think there's concerns there. And there were concerns when he came into college about knee issues. That's why he fell to the 4th round. If I recall correctly, last offseason, he basically got the opportunity to seek a trade and they didn't get anything. And so he restructured his deal to stay in Philadelphia. So I could see potentially the market for him not developing the way that people think it might. Just based off of his lack of production until the Super Bowl and the knee concerns. And so, maybe teams are a little leery for that. If so, the Eagles it would be good if the Eagles could sign him. So they're not going to pay him top dollar, but if he's not going to get top dollar, he's talked about wanting to be in a good situation, and Philadelphia is a good situation for him. So if the top dollar doesn't materialize, I could see him being a guy they bring back to help the edge rusher room and also to alleviate that dead cap. So I'll take him at my number 4 pick here. And then my 5th pick, I'm debating between 2 guys. I'm going to take Avonte Maddox. So don't love that, but
I'm stunned at your last 2 picks, Shane. I'm going to be honest. I'm stunned at Maddox and Sweat.
I don't love the Maddox thing either, but as we kind of mentioned, who was the guy that came on the field in the Super Bowl when Cooper DeJean left? It was Avonte Maddox. Who was the guy that came on the field anytime Reed Blankenship or Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was out? It was Avonte Maddox. And so if Avonte Maddox is your safety 3 this year and he was your CB4, well, he wasn't your CB4, Isaiah Rodgers was, but he was your backup slot. That's a lot of backup positions filled by one guy who is not going to get a large contract. And so would the Eagles bring Avonte Maddox back on a $2 million deal to back up several positions? I think that could be something they would be interested in. So Avonte Maddox, don't love it. Don't love any of those. Jonny, you're on the clock for your last pick.
Yeah, I must admit, I would have Maddox off the list. Maybe I was wrong. I didn't see any due. I know he made 1 play in the Super Bowl, like 1 play, and everyone's like, he can play. But I was like, he doesn't look like he can play the rest of the year, sadly. I'm going to go with Milton Williams. I think if the Eagles don't pay Zach Bourne, then I think they almost have to pay Milton Williams. I don't know if you can lose Milton, Sweat, and Bourne. I personally think Sweat is way out of the price range. I just don't think he's a great fit for Fangio's style, whereas I think Milton Williams and Zach Bourne are. I feel like it's one or the other. I haven't published it yet, but I've got my Milton Williams film review up very shortly. And I basically say in the conclusion, I think it's one or the other. I think you have to almost bring back one of the 2. I would prioritize Bourne, but I don't think you can let either of them walk out the door. I mean, letting Sweat, Bourne, and Williams go is a serious talent deficiency in one off season.
So I've got Milton lower because, like BLG, I think they're going to prioritize Bourne over Milton Williams, and I think defensive tackles get paid more. I did read, and I've got this in the article, I think the most snaps he's ever played, Milton, is like 500 snaps, which is pretty incredible how much money he's going to get paid for such a limited role player technically, but that's football. And talent pays. So I'll go Milton Williams with my final pick.
All right. And that brings it to you, BLG. Out of Paris Campbell, CJ Uzoma, and LaRaven Clark. Take your pick.
Electric stuff here. I will say on Milton Williams, I just don't think he's going to be back. And I think that, I don't really want to disparage Milton Williams because he had a great season. He's a nice player. But I just think what he's going to get paid relative to what he is just going to be not like that. It's going to be out of skew. Is that it's not going to be lined up. It's not going to be synced. I just think that, especially given it's supposed to be loaded, and you know, Shane, you can speak to this better than me, and Jonny, I'm sure too. Once you're getting into it, the loaded defensive line class, defensive tackle especially. The fact that Jalen Carter is really awesome, and not to just say anyone can have success playing next to him, but I think more people can have success playing next to him, Jalen Carter being that piece and drawing extra attention and giving other guys one-on-ones that I like Milton Williams around, and in a perfect world, no salary cap, you know, you definitely keep that kind of guy. But I also think too, the fact that the Eagles let him get to free agency, they don't do that with players. They identify as core players. They don't really do that and then sign them as they're about to get to the market. You just don't really see that very often. So I think he's going to get priced out of the Eagles' price range considerably, and I think they're expecting that as well. So that's why he ranks so low. In theory, he should be higher because he's a good young player, but I don't see the fit lining up. Anyway, with my last pick here, man, a pretty just dreadful list. I'm going to say Uzoma probably maybe retires, or he should, because he was just bad whenever he had to play. Can't catch, can't really block. LaRaven Clark was the most kind of technical member of the 2024 Super Bowl Eagles. He was on IR since May, the entire year. So it's not even he participated in a training camp practice with them. They've kept him around as offensive line depth. But I'm going to take Paris Campbell because Jalen Hurts is willing to throw to him in practice, at least. I've seen that before. And whatever. I mean, I guess they need some receiver bodies for camp bodies. And that's all I've got.
All right. So you said Paris Campbell?
Paris Campbell, yeah.
All right. So that leaves CJ Uzoma and LaRaven Clark out. Not to spoil anything because we're ranking defensive tackles for Armchair Scouts tonight, but I currently have 3 guys with first round grades and 6 guys with second round grades. So I think there's a lot of defensive tackle talent in the draft this year, but that's a whole different show. So that's going to do it. Or I guess I can. All right. So our free agent picks, I have Ben Van Sumeren, Fred Johnson, Oren Burks, Josh Sweat, and Avante Maddox. Jonny has Ricky Lovato, Britton Covey, Mekhi Becton, Isaiah Rogers, and Milton Williams. And BLG has Zach Bond, Jack Driscoll, Brandon Graham, Kenny Gainwell, and Paris Campbell. So we'll track those along. We won't need to dedicate a whole show to those, but we'll definitely revisit that once the rosters settle out and see where we landed. So I think that is going to about do it for this episode. BLG, thanks for coming on. Always enjoy having you on. Hopefully we can do this some more in the off season, but before we let you go, plug your stuff. You got any written work coming out, anything that you want to shout out, or any final thoughts?
I want to plug Jonny Page's film reviews that he's got going on. Obviously, at Bleeding Green Nation, they're great, especially the free agent ones. I like them all, obviously, Jonny, but I like the free agent ones. I think are especially valuable because then it's sometimes it's the player leaves and they're like, don't hold up, don't panic. This actually made sense, this or the evaluation, or it could be well, why are we resigning this player? And then boom, it's just they're really, I think, handy. They're good at the moment, but also then good to reference back to. So definitely looking forward to those. And then for me, I've got a positional review series going on at bleedinggreennation.com where we're voting stay or go for every player on the team. So if you missed out being in this game on the pod here, you can enjoy voting in the polls on Bleeding Green Nation about which players you think should stay or go. And then once that's done, I will, rank all those or whatever, put those out in terms of the players who got the most stay and the most go. So just working on that at bleedinggreennation.com.
All right, great stuff. Jonny, any final thoughts? Anything you want to shout out before we get out of here?
No, BLG did my work for me. So legend. Yeah, I really like player analysis. I always do. It's one of my favorite things to do. I think free agency, when the Eagles sign someone and when they draft someone, they're always my favorite articles. It's very rare you get the time to just go back and watch someone like individually. And I don't watch, like, I wouldn't lie and say I watch every Milton Williams snap again, but it's very easy these days to go on NFL Pro and just type in Milton Williams and spend an hour or two just literally looking at highlights of Milton Williams. And it makes it a lot easier when you're writing about them to actually focus on one player, because you always notice stuff that you just simply don't have the time to notice when watching after the game, because the idea that anyone can focus on one player is just not true. So it's nice to actually go back and specifically focus on one. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And definitely don't have to make that an annual thing, the season predictions. There's a good comment earlier on from Kai Jelashane saying we'll get that in the Discord next year. Yeah, definitely. I will promise I will never ever get that many things right in my entire life again. So the only way is downhill in future years, sadly.
Yeah, so just discount all of Jonny's draft takes this year. He used up all of his seer tendencies this last football season, but that is going to about do it again. Thanks again, Brandon, for joining us here. You guys be sure you are following Brandon on Twitter at Brandon Gowton. Check out his written work as well as Jonny's written work on bleedinggreennation.com. And I know you did a little bit of podcasting, some post-game stuff with Sheil on the Philly special. You doing anything over there over the off season, or is that all up in the air?
I think, yeah, up in the air, but we'll see. I imagine we will at least get together to talk sometimes about that. Also, there's for the diehards here, there's a special episode of the NFC East mixtape that somehow RJ Ochoa, a big Cowboys fan, agreed to do with me last week, even though obviously like a terrible season for the Cowboys in many respects, in addition to the Eagles actually winning the Super Bowl. So I would recommend that out if people haven't checked that as well. Again, that's not anywhere like podcasted, but it's on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube page.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys go check that out. I didn't know that was out. I don't think I followed that anymore. I need to go refollow that one. So that's good stuff. So be sure you check that out. Give these guys a follow on Twitter. Brandon is at Brandon Gowton. Jonny is at Jonny Page 9. I am at Shane Half NFL, and we will catch you guys next time.